Welcome to God's Angel, where every story reminds us that God sees what people forget. She didn't grow up dreaming of success. She grew up just trying to survive. Abuse was normal, being unwanted was familiar, and love felt like something meant for other people. But what the enemy meant to destroy, God was quietly preparing to restore. This is Elena's story. From the very beginning of her life, Elena Carter knew pain before she ever knew peace. She wasn't born into safety. She wasn't welcomed into warmth. She entered the world surrounded by chaos. As a small child, Elena experienced things no child should ever have to understand. She was abused physically, emotionally, mentally. She was neglected, misused, spoken to harshly, and treated as if her existence was an inconvenience. Sometimes the pain came from silence, other times from hands that were supposed to protect her. There were nights she went to bed hungry, days she stayed quiet just to avoid attention, moments she wished she could disappear, because disappearing felt safer than being seen. Before she was old enough to spell the word family, she had already learned that adults didn't always stay. Elena's childhood became a cycle she couldn't escape. Foster home after foster home, apartment after apartment, trailers, shelters, temporary places with temporary people. Some homes were loud, some were cold, some were worse than others, but none of them felt like home. Each time she unpacked her small bag of belongings, she hoped maybe this place would be different. Maybe this time someone would keep her. And every time she was wrong. By the age of 10, Elena had already learned how to guard her heart. She didn't cry easily, not because she wasn't hurting, but because no one came when she did. She learned how to read the room, how to stay invisible, how to survive. What she didn't know was that God had already seen every tear. One quiet afternoon, something unexpected happened. A couple walked into the foster agency. Their names were Harold and Vivian Brooks. They weren't loud. They didn't make promises. They didn't ask Elena to perform or pretend. They simply looked at her. And for the first time in her life, someone saw her. When they didn't see a problem child, they didn't see a broken past. They saw potential. They saw worth. They saw a little girl deserving of love. Not long after that day, they adopted her. For the first time in her life, Elena had her own room, her own bed, her own clothes, her own space. She didn't have to hide food anymore. She didn't have to brace herself for yelling. She didn't have to earn affection. Love was simply there. Harold and Vivian Brooks didn't just provide financially. They showed up emotionally. They attended school events. They encouraged her dreams. They corrected her with patience, not anger. Slowly, the walls around Elena's heart began to come down. She learned how to trust. She learned how to hope. She learned that love didn't always disappear. As Elena grew, she discovered something powerful. She was smart, focused, driven. She poured herself into her education. School became her safe place. Knowledge became her shield. Success became her motivation, not for money, but for freedom. She was determined that her past would not follow her into her future. And it didn't. Elena earned a spot at a prestigious college. She made friends who became family. She graduated at the top of her class. The little girl the world tried to break was becoming a woman the world could not ignore. But even with all her success, there was still a part of her heart that longed for something more. Elena had survived abuse. She had survived abandonment. She had survived a childhood that should have destroyed her. She believed the hardest part of her life was behind her. But she didn't know yet that her greatest test wouldn't come from strangers. It would come from someone she would love, like her own child. And that is where the story truly begins. Elena thought surviving her childhood was the hardest thing she'd ever do, but she was wrong. Because the deepest betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the ones you love the most. Episode 2 is coming next.